The twin suns were setting over the red plains of Arkan 3, painting the metallic dust with shades of fire and blood. A lone human walked along the quiet path, his boots leaving deep marks in the sand. His name was Mason Hale, a former engineer from Earth. Now stranded among alien worlds after the war had ended, he carried a small tool belt, a half-broken communicator, and the tired look of someone who had seen too many battles. As he walked, the silence broke with a faint sound, a soft cry for help. Mason turned, scanning the dunes until he saw a small figure beside a broken hover cart, smoke rising from its engine. The figure was covered in a long gray cloak, but he could see her trembling hands struggling to lift the heavy wheel. When he came closer, she looked up, her eyes glowing faintly blue. An alien girl, young, afraid, and exhausted. "Do you need help?" Mason asked quietly. The girl hesitated, her voice soft and melodic. "I can't fix it. The energy coil burned out. My family will leave without me." He knelt beside the wreck, ignoring the curious stares of the alien villagers watching from a distance. Most of them avoided humans, still angry from the wars that had burned half their sky. But Mason didn't care about politics. He just saw a machine that needed fixing. And someone in trouble. He opened his tool belt, the familiar weight of metal and wire calming his mind. The hover cart's coil was melted, but Mason had an old Earth capacitor that might work. He worked silently, sweat dripping down his neck as the twin suns faded. The alien girl watched him carefully, her expression slowly changing from fear to wonder. After an hour, the hover cart lifted slightly from the ground, humming back to life. The girl gasped, her eyes widening. "It's working!" "You fixed it?" Mason smiled faintly. "Just a patch job. It'll hold until you get home." She pulled her hood down, revealing silvery hair that shimmered in the dying light. "I am Lyra," she said, bowing her head slightly. "I owe you." "Human," he waved it off. "You don't owe me anything. Just stay safe out here." He turned to leave, the stars already beginning to shine. But before he could take 2 steps, her voice stopped him. "Wait. No one helps my kind anymore." There was something fragile in her tone. Something lonely. Mason looked back at her, small, thin, clutching the handles of her repaired cart like it was her life. He realized she might not just be any alien girl. Her cloak bore the mark of the Lithari, a species once feared and hated during the war, and here she was, thanking a human that night. Mason set up camp near the ridge, the stars cold and endless above. He didn't expect anyone to follow him, but when dawn came, the scent of something warm filled the air. He sat up, surprised to see Lyra sitting nearby, holding a steaming cup. "I brought you tea," she said softly, her eyes glowing with quiet gratitude. He blinked, unsure. "You followed me?" "I said I owed you," she replied, smiling faintly. "And my people repaid debts." The wind carried the smell of metal and herbs, a strange mix of alien spice and Earth's memory. For the first time in years, Mason felt something he hadn't felt since before the war. Peace. He took the cup, their fingers brushed for a moment, and the suns rose behind them, painting the world gold. He didn't know then that this small act of kindness would change both their worlds forever. But somewhere deep inside, he already felt it beginning. Each morning, as the suns of Arkan 3 rose over the crimson horizon, Lyra appeared from the mist with a small metal flask in her hands. Mason would already be awake, sitting near his campfire, cleaning his tools, pretending not to expect her, but she always came, walking lightly across the sand, her silver hair glinting like strands of moonlight. She poured him tea in silence, a sweet, smoky blend that calmed the air around them. He would thank her, and she would nod, never staying long. Days turned into weeks, and the strange routine continued. Mason repaired machines for travelers who passed through the outpost, and Lyra brought him tea. Sometimes she brought small fruits from her world, or stories of her village hidden beyond the dunes. He listened quietly, drawn to her voice, to the way she spoke about life with hope even after all that had been lost. One morning he noticed something different. Lyra's wrist bore a faint scar glowing beneath her skin, shaped like the mark of the Lithari royal crest. He frowned slightly. "Lyra, you're not just a villager, are you?" She froze, the wind tugging at her cloak. "Please, don't ask about that," she whispered. "It's dangerous." Her eyes flicked toward the ridge, where dark shapes moved faintly against the rising sun. Mason followed her gaze. Armored figures watching from afar, their armor marked with the crest he had seen in old war files. That night the desert felt colder. Mason sat by his fire, thinking of the past, the human fleet burning across alien skies, the treaties signed in blood and silence. He had repaired her cart without asking who she was. But now he knew she carried something much heavier than gratitude. The next morning, Lyra came again, but her hands trembled as she poured his tea. "They know I come here," she said softly. "My people think I betrayed them." "Betrayed them?" Mason asked. "Because I speak to you," she whispered. "Because you are human?" Mason looked at her for a long moment, then took the cup from her shaking hands. "Let them think what they want," he said quietly. "We fought enough wars already." Lyra smiled sadly. "You don't understand, Mason. They don't forgive. They don't forget." Before he could reply, a distant sound split the silence. Engines roaring across the horizon. 3 Lithari patrol gliders cut through the air, sleek and black, heading straight toward them. Lyra's face went pale. "They found me," she whispered. "You have to go." But Mason stood, his jaw tightening. "No, I'm not running again." He grabbed his toolkit, pulled out a plasma spanner, and pointed toward the cart he had once repaired. "Get in," he said. "I'm not letting them take you." Lyra hesitated. "You can't fight them, Mason. They'll kill you." He smirked faintly. "Then I'll die fixing another problem." The hover cart lifted from the ground, its patched coils glowing as he rerouted the power manually. They shot forward across the dunes, chased by the black gliders, energy blasts carving the sand behind them. The air screamed around them, the twin suns blinding as Mason steered the failing machine toward the canyon. Lyra held on, her hands glowing faintly blue as she tried to stabilize the engine with her strange energy. He risked a glance at her, her face determined, fierce, nothing like the quiet girl who once brought him tea. "Hold on," he shouted. "This thing wasn't built for flying." "It will if you believe it," she yelled back, her voice breaking through the chaos. The cart dove into the canyon, energy bolts exploding against the rock walls. Mason's hands moved like a machine, adjusting circuits, rerouting power, every nerve alive again for the first time in years. He felt like the man he used to be, an engineer, a soldier, a human who refused to give up. The gliders followed close, but Lyra closed her eyes, whispering words in her alien tongue. A surge of blue light burst from her palms, wrapping the cart in a glowing shield. The blasts hit, but the energy bent away, scattering into the canyon walls. When the dust cleared, the cart landed roughly near a dried riverbed. Both of them breathing hard, Mason turned to her, eyes wide. "What was that?" She looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. "A part of what I am." He stared, realizing that the girl he had helped was far more than she appeared, and that he had just crossed a line that no human was supposed to cross. The suns began to set again, the canyon glowing in shades of red and gold. Lyra's gaze softened. "You saved me." "Again?" she said quietly. Mason smiled tiredly. "Let's call it even." But deep inside, he knew it was far from over. The chase had just begun, and whatever secret Lyra carried was about to change everything. Night fell over the canyon like a heavy curtain, the air thick with dust and fading heat. Mason built a small fire beside the broken hover cart. Sparks leaping into the dark sky. Lyra sat across from him, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she had somehow managed to save. Neither spoke for a long time, the silence filled only by the crackling flame and the distant echo of engines still searching. Finally, Mason broke the quiet, his voice low. "Who are you, really?" "Lyra." She looked into the fire, the blue glow of her eyes reflecting the light. "You wouldn't believe me," she murmured. "Try me," he said, shifting closer. She reached up and pulled aside the cloth at her wrist, revealing the glowing mark fully for the first time. It shimmered like liquid crystal, pulsing softly with life. "This is the crest of the Lithari heir," she whispered. "I was born to rule a world that hates my compassion." Mason blinked slowly. "A princess," he said, half in disbelief. Lyra nodded. "A prisoner more than a princess. My people fear humans. They think mercy is weakness." She told him how she had escaped her guards, disguised herself as a villager, and wandered beyond the walls of her city. She wanted to see the truth for herself, to learn if the stories of brutal humans were real. But instead she had met him, a tired engineer who repaired what others broke. "You didn't treat me like an enemy," she said softly. "You just helped." Mason stared into the flames, his jaw tightening. "Maybe because I'm done fighting wars," he said. "I just want to fix things now." Her gaze lifted to his, steady and full of quiet strength. "That's why they'll fear you even more," she whispered. "Because you show them what they can't destroy, and kindness." Before Mason could answer, a faint sound drifted through the canyon, a low hum, rhythmic and growing louder. Lyra's head snapped up, her expression turning to alarm. "They found us again," she said. "The Royal Enforcers, and they never stop." Mason grabbed his tool belt and moved fast, checking the hovercart's circuits. "Can it fly?" "Not without a new coil," she said, panic creeping into her tone. He pulled out the last spare part he had, a cracked earth capacitor, held together by wire and hope. "It'll have to do," he muttered. Lyra stared at him. "You'd risk your life for me again." Mason smiled faintly. "You bring me tea every morning." "That's worth something." They worked together under the dying light. Human and alien, hands moving in perfect rhythm. When the hum became a roar, Mason slammed the hatch closed. "Get in." The cart lifted shakily into the air as the first plasma bolt streaked through the canyon. The shock waves rattled the metal, but Mason grinned. "Still holds," Lyra reached out, her hand glowing bright blue, and the shield flared to life again. The combined light of human steel and alien energy cut through the darkness like a blade. As they soared above the canyon, Mason shouted over the wind. "Where are we going?" Lyra's voice was steady now, stronger. "To the ancient relay tower. If I reach it, I can send a message to the Alliance. They must know I still live." "The Alliance," Mason echoed. "They'll think a human kidnapped you." "Then we show them the truth," she said. Together, the gliders closed in, their engines wailing like hungry beasts. Mason twisted the controls, diving between the rocks, the cart scraping sparks across the stone. "Hold it steady," Lyra cried. "We're almost there." He gritted his teeth, sweat stinging his eyes. "You better make that tea extra strong tomorrow," she laughed, even as the blasts rained down. "You humans joke even when death is near." "It keeps us sane," he replied. The tower appeared at last, a giant relic of glass and steel, half buried in sand, still reaching for the stars. Mason guided the hovercart toward it. But a final blast struck their side. They spun, metal shrieking. Before crashing into the base of the tower, the world blurred, sand and fire swallowing sound. Mason's vision dimmed, but he heard Lyra's voice calling his name, firm and desperate. "Stay with me, Mason, you can't die." "Not yet," he tried to answer. But darkness pulled him under. As his heartbeat slowed, Lyra pressed her glowing hands to his chest. Blue light surged through his body, wrapping him in warmth. And then the world vanished into white. The first thing Mason felt was warmth, not from the desert sun, but from within his chest. Pulsing like a second heartbeat, he opened his eyes slowly. The world blurred in blue light, shapes floating in the haze. Lyra was kneeling beside him, her hands still glowing, tears streaking her silver cheeks. "You're alive," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I thought I lost you." Mason sat up weakly, his body humming with strange energy. "What did you do?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "I gave you part of my essence," Lyra said softly. "My life force, it's forbidden. But I couldn't let you die." He looked at his hands, faint blue veins of light crawling under his skin. He could feel everything, the vibration of the ground, the whisper of the wind, even the hum of the stars above. "This isn't possible," he muttered. Lyra shook her head. "It is now." The old relay tower stood beside them, its structure half broken but still alive with faint power. Lyra turned toward it, determination shining in her eyes. "If I can reactivate the core, I can contact the Alliance fleet before the Enforcers arrive," she said. Mason pushed himself to his feet, his limbs steady despite the pain. "Then let's fix it." Together they entered the tower, the air thick with dust and static. Ancient human technology mixed with alien design, a relic from when Earth and the Lithari had once worked together before war tore them apart. Mason studied the panels, his mind racing with new clarity. The alien energy inside him seemed to sharpen his thoughts. He understood circuits he had never seen, patterns that once made no sense now fitting together perfectly. "Lyra, I can read this," he said, his voice full of wonder. She looked surprised. "The energy linked you to our systems. You are part Lithari now." He smiled faintly. "Guess that makes me have trouble." She laughed softly despite the tension. "You always were." The hum of engines echoed outside. Faint at first, then closer. The Enforcers had tracked them again. Lyra's expression hardened. "They won't stop until I'm dead or captured." Mason glanced at the control board, his mind racing. Then we make sure they never get either. He began rerouting the tower's remaining power into the transmitter core, sparks flying as systems came alive after decades of silence. Lyra joined him, channeling her own energy through her hands, feeding the dying machine. The ground shook as the first blast hit the tower, metal groaning under the assault. "Keep going," Mason shouted. "Almost there." Lyra's light grew brighter, her voice breaking as she cried out. "The signal. It's almost ready." A massive explosion tore through the lower structure. Throwing Mason backward, he hit the wall hard, pain flaring across his chest, but the strange energy inside him pulsed stronger. Knitting his wounds in seconds, he rose again, eyes glowing faintly blue. For the first time, Lyra looked at him not as a human, but as something beyond, something reborn. "Mason," she whispered, awe in her voice. "You're changing." "Maybe," he said, gripping a plasma wrench like a sword. "But I'm still me." The doors burst open. Armored enforcers storming in, their weapons glowing red. Lyra staggered, her energy fading. "I can't hold them all." Mason stepped forward, his body radiating a soft blue light. "You don't have to," he said quietly. "You fixed me. Now it's my turn." The first bolt fired. But Mason raised his hand and the energy bent in midair, curving away like it had hit an invisible wall. He didn't understand how, but the Lithari energy obeyed him. Responding to his will, the next blast came, and he redirected it into the floor. The explosion throwing the enforcers off balance. Lyra stared in disbelief. "You're using the essence," he smiled faintly. "Guess your tea wasn't the only thing that changed me." They fought side by side. Human resolve and alien light intertwined, each movement precise. Each strike fueled by something greater than survival. When the last enforcer fell, the tower was burning, the signal sent, the message carried into the void. Lyra fell to her knees, exhausted, her glow dimming. Mason caught her, holding her close. "It's done," he said softly. "You did it." She looked up at him, eyes shining faintly. "No, Mason, we did it outside." The night sky split with streaks of light, ships descending through the clouds. The Alliance had received the signal and they were coming. But Mason knew peace wouldn't come easily. Not with what he had become. Lyra sensed it too, whispering, "You're not the same anymore." He nodded slowly, watching the stars. Maybe that's what the universe needed. Something in between. The desert wind howled around the broken tower, carrying with it the scent of metal, fire, and tea. Two souls, one human, one alien, standing together at the edge of a new dawn. The sky burned with streaks of silver fire as the Alliance fleet descended through the clouds. For the first time in years, Archon 3 saw ships of both human and Lithari, designed flying side by side, their lights weaving through the crimson dusk. Mason stood on the ridge beside the broken tower, the wind tugging at his jacket. His eyes faintly glowing blue. Lyra stood next to him, her silver hair lifting in the wind, her expression calm but uncertain. "They're coming for you," Mason said quietly. "Your people, your fleet." Lyra nodded. "And for you too, Mason Hale. The man who touched the essence and lived." He smiled faintly. "Never planned on being famous." "Not famous," she whispered, "remembered." The air shimmered as a shuttle landed near them, sleek and dark, bearing the crest of the Alliance. Guards stepped out, followed by an older alien with white eyes and robes heavy with symbols of command. He studied Lyra for a long moment, then bowed deeply. "Princess Lyra, the Council believed you were gone." Lyra's voice was steady. "I lived because of him," she said, nodding toward Mason. "A human who showed mercy." The old alien's gaze turned to Mason, his expression unreadable. "You carry our light within you." Mason nodded slowly. "Uninvited guest, I guess." "It was no accident," the alien said. "The essence chooses, it doesn't obey." Lyra stepped forward. "Then maybe it chose right." A silence hung between them. Heavy and sacred, the old alien turned to the fleet above. "The Council will fear him, they will not understand." "Then teach them," Lyra said, her voice rising with quiet fire. "Tell them that humanity is not the enemy. It is the mirror we needed to see ourselves." Mason watched her speak, pride swelling in his chest. He had repaired a cart, nothing more. Yet that single act had repaired something much greater, a broken bridge between two worlds. The fleet's lights reflected in Lyra's eyes as she turned back to him. "They want me to return," she said softly, "but I don't want to go without you." Mason shook his head. "Your people need you more than I do." They need hope, she said, and you are part of that hope. He looked up at the twin suns breaking through the clouds. One red, one gold. You'll make them see, he said quietly. You always do. Lyra's hand found his, their fingers locking, her skin warm against his, the glow of shared energy between them soft and steady. Will you stay here, she asked, on this broken world? Mason smiled. Someone's got to fix it. The shuttle's engines roared as the guards prepared to leave. Lyra stepped closer, her voice trembling. Then I'll come back every dawn, he laughed softly. With tea, she promised, smiling through tears. She turned away, her cloak fluttering like silver flame as she walked toward the shuttle. Mason watched until the doors closed and the ship rose into the sky. Vanishing into light, the wind was silent again, carrying only the soft hum of the tower and the whisper of memory. Every morning after that, as the suns rose over the red horizon, Mason found a small metal flask placed near his campfire. Always warm, always full of the same sweet smoky tea, no footprints ever led to it. No shadows ever lingered, but he would sit by the fire, sip the drink and smile, knowing that somewhere among the stars she still kept her promise. The man who repaired an alien girl's broken cart had changed a galaxy. Not with war or power, but with kindness. And as long as the suns rose over Arkan 3, their story lived, whispered by wind, carried by light, remembered by hearts.